Welcome to Reading Bear. Today we've got a story where OP discovers a neighbor is building an entire house on OP's land. OP plays it cool, follows every demand to the letter, and lets the receipts pile up. I didn't buy my land to make a point. I bought it because it was boring on purpose. It's a flag lot tucked behind a row of normal houses, the kind you drive past without noticing. A skinny gravel strip runs along a drainage ditch and then widens into a rectangle of trees and scrub. When I was hunting for a place to store tools and maybe one day build a small shop, it checked all the boxes. Cheap taxes, no HOA, not pretty enough to attract drama. That last part turned out to be wishful thinking. For a while, it was uneventful. I cleaned up trash, trimmed branches, and marked the corners with bright caps so I wouldn't lose track in the weeds. I parked a small trailer there and stacked lumber on cinder blocks. I liked going out after work with a thermos of coffee, sweeping the driveway, and imagining where the shop might go someday. Then, a moving truck showed up at the corner lot that touches my skinny driveway and part of my back line. Out came a woman I'm going to call Karen, because that's honest to the experience. In the first week, she told the mail carrier where to put everyone's boxes. She told a delivery driver where not to park, even though it wasn't her curb. She knocked on my truck window while I was unloading plywood and announced that my weed whacker needed a sharper line because the community standards are slipping. I smiled and kept my answer short. I don't have a community. I have one piece of dirt behind some houses, but people like her love the word. The first time she stepped on my lot, she had a clipboard. She said her project would start soon and asked me to keep my private road clear so trucks could get through. I told her it wasn't a road for anyone but me. It's just my driveway, on my parcel, serving my parcel. She laughed in a way that said she was making a mental note to fix my wrong opinion later. A week later, a contractor pickup rolled into my gravel strip like it was public. I walked up and said, calm, that they were on the wrong property. The driver shrugged and said they were told to use the back lane. I pointed to the corner markers and showed him a laminated copy of my parcel map. He apologized and backed out. They parked on her curb instead. That's when she came storming over in gym clothes and sunglasses, waving her phone like it was a badge. She had a screenshot of some real estate listing map, the kind with fuzzy lines, and she stabbed at it with her finger. This entire strip is community access, she said. It's not yours to gatekeep. It's literally the shape of my parcel, I said. Flag lots look weird on those drawings. If you want, I can email you my actual deed and the survey sketch. She said she didn't need my homemade paperwork. I wish I could say I was surprised. Since I'm boring, I hired a real surveyor. He came out with a tripod and a prism and found the iron pins with a metal detector, just like the first survey had said. He put fresh wooden stakes on the corners with fluorescent tape. I took photos with my phone in the frame so the timestamps would be obvious. I sent her a polite email with the surveyor's name, license number, and a PDF of the sketch. I wrote, if you want to build a fence on your line, I'm happy to help you locate it. She replied with a wall of words that boiled down to, your surveyor lies. The fence that used to be here proves the boundary is further inside your lot, and she would be enforcing her rights to access. I printed the email and added it to a folder. The day the excavator arrived, I was there putting up a cheap plastic snow fence 2 feet inside my line. I wasn't trying to stop anyone. I just wanted a bright visual that said, clearly, this side is mine. An inspector truck rolled by and idled for a bit. The operator of the excavator tested the dirt with the bucket and then started scraping. He was cutting a rectangle not on her parcel but tucked into the trees on mine, clearly butting up to where my stakes were. I waved for him to stop and pointed at the stakes. He killed the engine and called his boss. The boss showed up, chatted with him, then walked over to me with practiced politeness. He said his client told them the property line was in dispute and they had authorization to proceed. I said the line wasn't in dispute. It was surveyed. He asked me to take it up with the client. That afternoon, I came home to a letter taped to my trailer. It was from her attorney. I put that in quotes because I learned later it wasn't written by a lawyer. It had bullet points and bolded threats. The short version: I was to cease all interference with her construction immediately. I was to remove obstructions within 48 hours. Specifically my plastic fence and a stack of lumber she claimed was on her side. I was forbidden to step on her job site for any reason, and any communication must go through her retained counsel. If I persisted in trespass, she would call the police and seek a restraining order. It ended with, govern yourself accordingly. That part made me laugh. I followed the letter to the letter. I didn't take down my plastic fence because it was on my side by 2 feet, but I didn't move it either. I didn't talk to her or any worker. I didn't set one foot on the dirt she claimed to control. I sent a certified letter addressed to the actual law office named in the letterhead, with a copy of my survey and a polite note that said, "Per your client's demand, I will not enter her job site. Be advised that your client's excavation and planned construction are on my parcel. I do not consent to any encroachment. Any improvements constructed on my land will be treated as fixtures of my land. Remove them, or I will seek all remedies." I sent a copy to the city building department and the county recorder for the paper trail. Then I stayed away and watched from my side of the stakes. They formed and poured footings that clearly crossed my line. I took photos from my driveway with my phone against the stake, so the bright tape sat next to wet concrete. I wrote dates on note cards and put them in the frame like crime shows do, not because I was playing detective, but because I wanted to make it obvious to a judge later that I wasn't guessing about when things happened. The inspector posted a yellow stop work notice the following day. It was there in the morning and gone by evening. When I called the city to ask if it was okay to remove those, the clerk sighed and said no, but she'd make a note. She suggested I file a code complaint online. I did. I attached my photos and the survey sketch. The crew didn't slow down. Forms turned into a slab. Lumber showed up. Walls went up. She hosted a little raise the roof gathering when the trusses were set, the kind with folding tables and cupcakes. I kept my distance and just logged it all. I can hear someone typing already. Why didn't you call the police? I did once. A polite deputy came out, looked at the stakes, and said it was a civil matter unless there was a court order. He told me to talk to a lawyer and get an injunction. So I did that too. I met with a real attorney who looked at my folder, smiled the practiced smile of someone who has seen this movie, and said, "We'll need a surveyor's affidavit, a complaint for declaratory relief, trespass, an injunction, and a lis pendens to cloud title. It's not fast, but your paper trail is great." He told me not to threaten anyone, not to step over the line, and not to sabotage anything. "If she wants you to stay off, he said. Let her build you exhibits. Malicious compliance tastes like paper and patience." The first court date we could get was a ways out. By the time it arrived, the house had walls, windows, and a roof. It wasn't finished, but it looked like a place. I kept wondering what the plan was on her end. Maybe she thought speed would make it inevitable. Maybe she believed her own map more than the survey. Maybe she thought I'd give up and sell her a strip because it was easier. People like her don't plan for other people to be more stubborn than they are. At the hearing, her attorney, this time a real one, argued that the boundary was ambiguous and construction had proceeded in good faith based on a long-standing use. He said the original old chain-link fence marked a practical boundary, complained that I was trying to weaponize a survey to extort his client. He also accused me of harassment for photographing workers. My attorney slid our exhibits across the table. There was the licensed surveyor's affidavit. There were photos of the stakes beside fresh concrete. There was the letter from her fake lawyer telling me to stay off her job site, and all communications must go through counsel, with the timestamp. There was the city's stop work notice. There were copies of my certified letters to her actual counsel and the city, timestamped by the Postal Service. He had me testify briefly. I said I stayed off as requested and let the process work. I said I didn't consent. I said I documented because I was told to communicate only through lawyers, and my camera was my memory. The judge ordered a joint survey, with both parties present. He extended the stop work order until then. The joint survey was awkward. Their project manager glared at me like I had personally moved the Earth's crust overnight. The surveyors strung a taut line between the pins and put little whisker markers every few feet. The tape didn't care about opinions. It ran right across the house footprint. On paper, it looked even worse for them because the slab wasn't barely over, it was swallowed. The majority of the new structure sat on my parcel, including the front door and most of the living room. They tried again in court, this time with an argument about an equitable easement. Their angle was that even if the structure crossed the line, the cost to move it would be enormous and I didn't need that slice of land. So the court should solve the problem by giving them an easement and ordering me to accept money for it. They called it the only sensible outcome. They said I was trying to get a free house, and that would be unjust. My attorney said the equitable doctrines they were invoking were for honest mistakes and minimal encroachments, not for building most of a house on a neighbor's land after being warned. He used the phrase, willful trespass. He also used unclean hands. He pointed again at the stop work notice that had gone missing the same day it appeared. He pointed at the letter where I was told to stay off and not interfere. Our compliance with their demand is the reason we didn't physically block the pour, he said. They can't now say our restraint obligates us to surrender our rights. The judge took a beat and asked a few plain questions. Had their side seen my survey before pouring? Yes. Did they have their own license survey contradicting it? No. Did they move the forms after the city posted a stop work notice? No. Was I ever on their job site after the letter? No. Did I, in writing, refuse consent? Yes. By certified mail. The judge put on reading glasses and looked down a long moment. When he spoke, he sounded tired of people like this. He said something close to, "The property line is not ambiguous. The joint survey resolves any doubt." He said a structure built on land belongs to the land, and builders proceed at their own risk when they ignore warnings. He said equitable relief requires equity, and there was none here. He granted my request for declaratory relief that the portion of the structure on my parcel was my property as a fixture. He granted an injunction barring them from entering my parcel. He ordered them to remove any portions of their construction that extended onto their own parcel without trespassing on mine, which was a weird way of saying good luck with that. He reserved the issue of damages and fees for a later hearing, but hinted strongly where he was leaning. I walked out in a daze. I had expected a long slog through multiple hearings and maybe a forced sale of a strip. I did not expect to walk in with a folder and walk out owning most of a house. If this sounds like a dream outcome, it was and it wasn't. Owning a half-finished house you didn't plan for is like being handed a dog you didn't adopt. It's cute in photos, and then it chews your shoes. I now had to legalize a structure that had never been permitted on my parcel. I had to deal with the city, fix setbacks, and get inspections for things I didn't watch being built. I had to make it safe. None of that is free. The next few weeks were a grind. She filed an appeal that went nowhere. She filed complaints with the city about me stealing her house, which earned her a polite letter about court orders. She sent me a message through her lawyer offering to buy an easement for a number that would have been funny if it wasn't so insulting. My lawyer wrote back that there was nothing to sell because a fixture is not an easement. And also, no. He reminded them the judge had reserved fees. I hired an inspector to do a private walkthrough of the parts I now owned. He found predictable shortcuts. The framing was fine, but the electrical work needed cleanup. The plumbing vents were wrong, and the slab insulation was a mess. The city wanted new permits and as-built drawings. I hired an architect to draw what existed and propose small changes to bring it within the rules. Most of it was solvable because my lot is big enough, but a corner of the structure stuck too close to the ditch. The city allowed a variance after a hearing where I stood up, explained the situation plainly, and promised to build a proper retaining wall and not dump runoff. Her crew disappeared. Bills followed them. Subcontractors who hadn't been paid filed mechanics liens, not on me, because I hadn't contracted them, but on her parcel and whatever interest she still claimed in the improvements. One of them cornered me at the site and tried to lean on me to pay. I showed him the court order and reminded him to talk to his own lawyer. He cursed her name, not mine, and left. The day I got my first permit approved in my own name, I stood in my driveway with the paper in my hand and felt the first bit of real relief. It wasn't over, but the path was clear. I could finish this on my terms. I had wanted a small shop, not a house, but a finished house on a quiet backlot would rent well. I did the math and watched it pencil out. At the damages hearing, the judge awarded me my attorney's fees and some costs tied to securing and permitting the structure. He didn't award everything I asked for because courts rarely do, but he gave enough that I didn't feel like I was paying to clean up someone else's mess alone. He also, this part was unusual, referred the case to the city attorney to look into the removed stop work notice and possible permit fraud. I didn't follow what happened after that. I didn't need the drama. I had drywall to hang. If you're wondering what happened to her, it wasn't dramatic. She slowed down. The big talk got small. There were fewer jogs in the street with loud phone calls about community standards. She disappeared for stretches. A for sale by owner sign popped up in her yard, then a real agent sign. The listing used careful language about partial construction. It sat. I heard through the grapevine that she moved into a rental across town and was suing her builder. The builder was suing her back. Everyone was blaming everyone. Months later, when my permits were complete and the utilities were connected, I made an offer through my lawyer to sell the finished place to her at market price, just to test whether she wanted the thing she had insisted was hers. The reply was a page and a half of outrage and not a single number. That told me everything. I finished the house to a simple standard. Durable flooring, neutral paint, nothing fancy. I didn't want to pour more money than sense into something born from someone else's temper. The first time I walked through when it was finished, lights on, water running, no dangling wires, I had a moment where I stood in the living room and felt the oddness of it. This space existed because a person refused to read a map and told me to stay off her dirt. It existed because I obeyed. I did exactly what she demanded. I stayed off. I did not interfere. I did not rescue her from herself. I let the tape line and the timestamps do the talking. The day I handed a new tenant the keys, he asked how I ended up with a place like that tucked behind normal houses. I told him it was a long story, and if he didn't mind a boring landlord, he'd never hear me tell it loud. He laughed, signed the lease, and moved a couch in that afternoon. A few practical things I did that mattered, in case someone reading this ever gets dragged into a situation like it. I kept it boring, and on paper. I didn't shout. I didn't get cute. I didn't play games with cones and chains to provoke anyone. I didn't have long driveway arguments. I set a plastic fence inside my line so I could comply with the demand to stay off. I documented everything with dates and angles that made it obvious what was happening. I used a licensed surveyor and kept his contact handy. I sent certified mail to the actual law firm listed and copied the city. I filed the code complaints without editorial comments. I hired a lawyer early. I was polite to the inspector and the deputy even when their answers were frustrating. I took a deep breath when people on the internet said I should bulldoze the slab at night. I didn't. I also remembered that equity is just a fancy way of saying, what feels fair to a judge? And nothing about a person ignoring clear warnings feels fair. Equitable remedies live on another planet from people who pull down a stop work notice and wave a fuzzy screenshot while concrete cures. When I put up a new fence later on the line, for real this time I paid the surveyor to set permanent markers in concrete so no one would have to guess again. I put nice caps on them. I bought signs that don't shout. They just say private property. Not because I need to make a point. Because I like boring. I still haven't built my shop. The plan changed. The rent pays the taxes and then some. And the lot is calmer than it used to be. Once in a while, someone delivering something to the new tenants or the neighbor asks about the weird driveway. I tell them it's a flag lot and point to the markers. They nod. We go on with our day. Every now and then, I run into the mail carrier. We joke about the time when the corner lot had a general manager. He asks if I ever hear from her. I don't. I'm not sure where she landed. I wish I could say I think she learned something, but people so invested in being right rarely learn when they lose. They just move and tell a story where they were wronged. I don't need to correct it. I have a court order and a set of keys and a stack of paid invoices that say otherwise. If there's a neat moral here, it's simple. When someone who loves control writes you a list of rules to control you with, read them closely. Sometimes the funniest and most effective thing you can do is exactly what they told you to. Sometimes the most satisfying win is the one that doesn't look like a win for a long time. Sometimes malicious compliance is as boring as certified mail and fluorescent tape. When I first put that bright plastic fence 2 feet inside my line, I felt silly. It looked like something you'd put up around a kid's soccer field. People slowed on the street and stared at the orange. I almost took it down out of embarrassment. Now, when I think of it, I smile. That fence kept me honest. It kept me off her job site like she demanded. It forced me to watch instead of jump. It helped a judge see that I didn't consent, didn't engage, and didn't interfere. It helped turn her house into mine. I still have that original letter with "Govern yourself accordingly" underlined in blue ink. I keep it in the same folder as the court order that says the structure built on my parcel is my property. The 2 pages live together like a setup and a punchline. Every time I open the folder to add one last receipt or copy a permit for my records, I see both and remember that some people don't need enemies. They just need a mirror, a map, and a little rope. The funny thing is, if she had simply walked over on day 1 with a cup of coffee and said, "I think the line is here, but I'm not sure. Can we hire a surveyor together and split the cost?" I would have said yes. We could have put a neat fence on the right line, swapped notes with the inspector, and both moved on with our separate boring lives. She could have built her place completely on her side. I could have built my shop on mine. Neither of us would have met a judge. But then I wouldn't be paying my mortgage with rent from a house I didn't plan to own. And she wouldn't have learned if she learned anything. That telling a neighbor to stay off your property is a dangerous way to live when your idea of your property doesn't match reality. I don't expect her to ever read this. People like her don't browse stories where the lesson is to slow down, ask questions, and listen to answers you don't like. But maybe someone else will. Maybe someone who has a community standards speech prepared this weekend will pause before delivering it and instead ask where the pins are. Maybe someone who's about to send a letter with fake lawyer letterhead will call an actual attorney first and hear the word trespass explained the hard way. Maybe a project manager will see a piece of bright tape and say, "We're not forming against that until I see a survey. If any of that happens, good. Fewer stupid fights, fewer cupcakes under trusses that don't belong where they stand." As for me, I govern myself accordingly. I sweep my driveway. I trim my weeds. I answer the door when the inspector stops by for one last sign-off, and we chat about how quiet the backlots can be when people let them. I keep the boring folder in a drawer and the keys on a hook. I walk the line once in a while and tap the caps with my boot. It's not glamorous. It's exactly what I wanted when I bought the place. A little piece of dirt that doesn't go anywhere. Anything extra that landed on it landed because someone insisted I stay away from it. I stayed away. The judge made it mine. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you again tomorrow.